Hello and welcome to the latest episode of Harmonious World. My name is Hilary Seabrook. If it's your first time listening to this podcast, welcome. Harmonious World is inspired by a Quincy Jones quote, which goes something like, "Imagine what a harmonious world it would be if everyone shared a little of what they're good at." So here on Harmonious World, I chat with musicians and those with an interest in music to get them to share what they are good at. My past guests have included Grammy winners, Grammy nominees, and those starting out in the music business. Alongside Harmonious World, you can find reviews of albums and live gigs, and the links are all in the show notes. For this episode, I am joined by bright new composer Vonn Vanier. This young composer has an incredible new album out called Dawn. And what you're listening to now is OPCI, which hopefully Vonn can explain what it means during our conversation. And this is the single from Dawn, the album. I hope you enjoy listening to my conversation with Vonn Vanier. Welcome to Harmonious World. I'm delighted to be joined by composer Vonn Vanier. Hi.
Hello, thank you so much for having me.
So we're going to be talking about OPCI, which is the single from Dawn, which is the album. So we can talk about everything. Let's talk about OPCI because that's a really interesting single. I think it's the second one, isn't it, from Dawn?
Correct.
So talk to me about this because it's a very interesting piece.
Well, in terms of the structure and the inspiration for it, it's certainly one of the more technical works on the album. It's OPCI stands for ordered pitch class intervals, and so each movement is structured and basically inspired by that concept. And so it's built out of 5 different movements, each with a very different sort of personality, I'd say. But they all are unified by the fact that they use this idea of ordered pitch class intervals, which is a concept from kind of more contemporary post-tonal music theory that, around a year ago I was learning about and decided to apply in a very, more creative sense within one of my musical works. And so, the second and fourth movement are really slow and use these intervals in sort of a, much more formulaic way. Whereas the first, third, and fifth movement, are a lot faster, higher energy, very neoclassical in a sense that, they take these sort of structures from classical forms and classical tradition, but use them in this very almost mathematically precise way.
Right, and I love I particularly love Dawn because you seem to be playing around with the genre and what modern music is. So I tend to interview people who are classical musicians or they're jazz musicians, and this doesn't even sit anywhere in a good way. So what inspired you when you were writing Dawn?
Yeah, well, first of all, I'd say the album, to your point, is certainly very diverse. First of all, you have these orchestral pieces like Rhapsody in C minor and Lost at Home, which are really dramatic and grand and sort of, have a certain weight to them. And then you have pieces like OPCI for solo piano, which are more technical, and then others for chamber ensembles like string quartet and wind quintet, which are, in some cases very ethereal and kind of mystical in a way. Others that are very light and playful, like Bloom for wind quintet, which is inspired by, the spring season and the sort of expansion that comes with that. And others which are very energetic and forward moving and unpredictable, like Jagged for string quartet. And so, in terms of the inspiration, I draw inspiration and influence from a wide variety of different composers, and I think we certainly see that in my music. So, everything from film music, and especially the music of Hans Zimmer, is a personal favorite of mine, to modern, more contemporary composers like Arnold Schoenberg, to even more traditional classical and romantic composers like Beethoven, of course, and Brahms is another favorite of mine. And so I think you see those different styles sort of kind of create an emulsion in my music, which is very unique and I hope very fresh and interesting for the listener.
Yeah, definitely. And actually, funnily enough, I'd already chosen Bloom as one of the tracks. I wanted to play a little extract of it at
Mhm.
this point in the podcast. So I'm going to do that now. You talk about Bloom, and it feels like that moment in spring where you suddenly go, oh, there's some yellow there and there's some pink there and that sort of thing. So where were you when you wrote this, and how did it come into your head?
Mhm. Well, for the past 3 summers, I've attended a program for composition called the Boston University Tanglewood Institute. It's in Western Massachusetts and, near Lenox, Massachusetts, namely. And so, it's near the Berkshire Mountain Range, and so there's all these sort of lush green, hills and mountains and forestry around the area where I was been studying for the past 3 summers. And so for this past summer is when I wrote Bloom. And, I was certainly inspired by, all the vegetation that was around me. But, I think the real origin of the piece was that I just was sort of improvising on the piano one day and came up with this clarinet line. And I knew, that I wanted to use that and expand upon it somehow. And so the piece opens with that one line played by the clarinet, and then that melody, sort of expands as different instruments enter and very colorful harmonies kind of begin to build as those instruments come in. And so that's how, that idea of sort of expansion is how I knew I wanted to, base the piece off of spring. And then, of course, having all that natural scenery around it just felt right to do that. And so, the piece begins and ends with this very kind of broad sounding, orchestration and melody that's meant to represent, the expansion of spring and of flowers and vegetation from sort of small beginnings. represented by that one solo clarinet. And then the middle section is much more playful. It takes that melody from the clarinet and sort of fragments it, and you see some playful dialogues going back and forth between different instruments meant to represent, the sort of playfulness and joyousness of spring.
Fantastic. And one of the things I really like about Dawn is the fact that you've got these different ensembles and the solo piano and all of this stuff. And it feels like you're literally creating the sound world that suits each piece.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, certainly. I think, with each piece, I had either some sort of image I had in my mind that I wanted to really represent with the music, or in other cases, it's much more of a sort of technical origin, as with OPCI, or just a melody that, upon improvising on the piano, that I really liked and wanted to expand. Yeah, and I think that's those sort of different processes by which each piece originated helps contribute to the diversity of the album. So some pieces like Shimmer for uh, a piano quintet, are inspired by a sort of shimmering lake and shimmering snow in the winter where I live here in Wyoming. And in other cases, it's inspired by a book like Lost at Home, inspired by All Quiet on the Western Front. And in other cases, it simply is, like with Witching Hour, just sort of a cool melody I came up with on the piano and wanted to build something out of.
Yeah. Actually, and Shimmer was the reason that I wanted to talk to you, because that was the first single that came out. And when I heard that, it's just beautiful, just a lovely piece. And it felt like everything was shimmering.
Yeah. Well, there's that was certainly the goal, and so there are some more technical aspects that I used to achieve that, and as I mentioned before, some specific imagery I had in mind that helped inspire me. And the piece uses, also a very kind of diverse set of sounds. On one hand, it uses, um, you know, sort of classical harmonies and melodies, very traditional styles, and mixes that with, types of techniques and sounds you would have heard more typically in the 20th century, especially. And so it uses the whole tone scale, which is known to be this sort of dreamy, kind of shimmery scale. Often in movies, it's literally known as sort of the dream sequence scale because that's when it's always used. And then I also use a type of chord structure called chordal harmony, that's very, colorful and expansive and has this sort of mystical feeling almost, in my opinion. And so I mix those with some, special rhythms that are, give a lot of energy to the piece in sort of, a unique way, I think.
Yeah, definitely. Well, at this point, I'm just going to play a little bit of Shimmer as well, because I just want my listeners to hear what that sounds like. So that was Shimmer. How did you choose the musicians to perform with you on this album?
Mhm. Well, I've had, first of all, the privilege of working with, some exceptionally talented musicians. I'd say it all sort of came about. Actually, the story starts many years ago. I had my origins as a musician in third grade when I joined a choir connected to my school, a professional choir called the Grace Cathedral Choir of Men and Boys in San Francisco. And so, I received a lot of rigorous musical training, which helped me, establish the basis to become the composer I am today. But at the same time, on special occasions like Christmas and Easter and other events, as the choir would play with an orchestral ensemble on those occasions. And so, over the years, it was mostly the same musicians in that ensemble. And so, me and my family got to know the concertmaster over those years, whose name is Jeremy Cohen, who is also a producer. And so, very fortunate to have gotten to know him and to forge that relationship. And as I continued to grow as a musician, he took an interest in the music I was writing, and eventually, we started to collaborate. And so, he introduced me and helped me get recordings with the Skywalker Symphony Orchestra and other smaller ensembles like the Quartet San Francisco, Quinteto Latino, among other ensembles who have just been, really, really fantastic. And so to know him as an 8-time Grammy nominated producer has just been really special and incredible experiences for me to work with those different musicians and ensembles.
Yeah, fantastic. Um, so this recording is going to be coming out a couple of days after the album is launched it's launched on the 16th of May, is that right?
Correct.
Excellent. So it's that, although we're talking before it's been launched, this will come out after
Mhm.
it's launched. What plans have you got for performing because obviously that's quite a tricky logistical thing when you've got so many different ensembles within one album. Have you got plans for performing everything together, or are you just going to do little bits? What's your plan?
Mhm. Well, to your point, it is somewhat difficult just because, there are so many different ensembles and instruments needed. You have the orchestra and then a wind quintet and a string quartet and a piano. And so it'd be certainly hard logistically to get them performed kind of all at once. But yes, I have been working with different ensembles to perform, different individual tracks on the album. And so this coming Saturday on May 3rd, I'm having a very special concert which I've organized in collaboration with a local orchestra here in Jackson, Wyoming. And so it's very sort of oriented towards the local environment and scenery and certainly a tribute to the small town I live in. And so members of the orchestra are playing Witching Hour, which is the string quartet, one of the string quartets on the album, and also Bloom for woodwind quintet. So that'll be very exciting for me to get to hear that live in performance this weekend.
Yeah, fantastic. So I'm going to point people to your website so that they can find out where you're performing
Mhm.
or where your music will be available. Um, and what's the best way for them to get hold of the album, Dawn? Is it best? Obviously, the best way is to come and see you, come to one of your concerts. But how is the second best?
Well, it's being released on all major music streaming services, so you can just look up my name, Vonn Vanier, and Dawn, and it should come up on Apple Music, Spotify, Tidal, anything else, any other streaming service you use. So it's pretty easily accessible. Or you
Yeah,
could also look on my website, and you can find links to the album there as well.
fantastic. Well, that's brilliant, Vonn. It's really nice to talk to you, and I wish you every success with this album. And with the pieces, it feels like you can let them out into the world in the middle of, in May, and then they will be able to be performed at lots of different places. So
Mhm.
that's really nice.
Yes, well, thank you so much again for speaking with me.
Thank you for joining me for that episode of Harmonious World, and I hope you enjoyed listening to my conversation with Vonn Vanier. What you're listening to now is Lost at Home from his album Dawn. Please remember that you can find reviews of albums and live gigs, and the link is in the show notes. I hope you enjoy listening to Harmonious World. Please do like, share, and review. Send me any comments that you might have. Until the next episode, I hope you have a very good week. Thank you for listening to the latest episode of Harmonious World. My name is Hilary Seabrook, and it's a great delight to bring this series of discussions with musicians and composers and writers and all sorts of people to you. Obviously, there's no point in having a podcast if people aren't listening, and I'm very grateful to my listeners for doing so. Thanks also to Joe English for composing and performing this new theme tune. So wherever you get your podcast, you can leave a review. You can share this with your friends and family, either as a link or on social media and that sort of thing. I'd be really grateful for that. Don't forget that you can subscribe now. There's a link wherever you get your podcasts. So have a great week, and please remember why I started this, which is just to try and make the world a little more harmonious. Thanks for listening to Harmonious World.